So, right away, there are just so many factors at play here that, kind of reconfirms what you and I both already know, that this is just a complete ridiculous sham trial. The fact that it is going on is just beyond a crime in and of itself. Um, do you have any confidence at all that if they were to extradite him to the United States, he would get anything resembling a fair day in court?
No, because he will be tried in the Eastern District Court of Virginia. That is known as the Espionage Court. No national security defendant in that court has won a case. John Kiriakou has spoken about this as well. He was convicted in that same court. And it's not carried out like a normal court case. The public would not have access to this case. Journalists would not, I don't think journalists would be able to cover it either. And the jury pool would be consisting of members of the intelligence community or their family members, again, because this is in country. So it would be inherently unfair. And then also, too, they have to use code words in the evidence. So, for example, if they're talking about classified material or things that are not meant to be made public, they'll have to give it like a code word like airplane to signify some other fact within WikiLeaks documents that is considered classified. I know that's a confusing concept to understand, but it's very prejudicial because then the jury is sitting there thinking, how bad could this be if I can't even hear the real evidence in the case, if they have to use code words? So it's a very secretive court. He doesn't stand a chance if he comes to the United States. There are some organizations, well, I wouldn't say organizations, there are some fringe groups that claim that he will be protected and the truth will come out if he comes to the United States. And that is just not true at all. That is completely false and just nonsense.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Espionage Act, which the Espionage Act goes back to 1917. It was a response to the First World War when there was a world war. Haven't had enough water yet, Taylor. But and it basically deals with cooperating with foreign entities, and it came about at a time when the entire world was in military conflict. So it just has no place today. Like it's a ridiculous act to invoke. And not enough people have spoken out about it, but some have. And they said we should not be prosecuting anyone under the Espionage Act anymore. It is completely, and it goes into, it's kind of runs parallel with the FARA Act. The FARA Act in reporting that they've used against here in the United States. They've used that against RT America. They used that against Shanghai. Interestingly enough, they had to use it against an American bureau of a Russian outlet and a Chinese outlet. But BBC America, all that other stuff, totally fine. For whatever reason, just the Russian outlet and the Chinese outlet, they needed to invoke this act against. For some reason, I don't know why. But they invoked the FARA Act, which was intended to combat Nazis. Like, that was the intention of it. And again, this goes back to World War II. So it's like they're invoking these acts that just have no application in our modern day and age to try to fulfill their own agenda. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is a fair assessment. It's bizarre because the U.S. Espionage Act of 1917 is being applied for the first time ever to a journalist and a publisher and to an individual who is not even American. Assange is Australian. So why is he being held accountable under the U.S. Espionage Act, but he's not granted First Amendment protections? Because that's what they're doing here. They're saying the First Amendment does not apply to foreign nationals, but the Espionage Act does. It is so outrageous. And to be using this against someone who is publishing material is just extremely frightening. But it seems that the tactic, again, that the prosecution is using is trying to state that WikiLeaks published the names of individuals and he put their lives at risk. And that's actually not true. It was The Guardian, specifically the journalists David Lee and Luke Harding, who published a book, the title of a book chapter was a password to very sensitive cables. They published this. And at the beginning of a documentary on WikiLeaks, there's actually this phone call that takes place where they notify the State Department about this and to take action immediately. So these journalists should be, if this is about justice and fairness, you would think that these other journalists would be held accountable too. I do want to make it clear, though, quickly, I'm not advocating for other journalists to be put in prison. But my point being is that why are we only targeting one person? But again, I don't want to see others be put in the same situation as Assange by any means.
Understand. And just for clarification here, so they are operating under the notion that this man, because he's not an American citizen, he does not have a First Amendment rights, but they can prosecute him under the Espionage Act. That does apply, but the First Amendment doesn't to him. That's what they're doing?
That is the latest interpretation, yes. And other attorneys I've spoken with, his U.S. attorney, Barry Pollock, he said that he does not agree with that interpretation of the law, but that is currently how they are it is perceived in this court. Mm-hmm.
That is a dictionary definition of we're going to have our cake and eat it too. That is the prosecution wanting to have their cake and eat it too. Oh, yeah, no, he's not. First Amendment doesn't, but no, Espionage Act, that still does. I mean, that's just, I don't understand. His attorneys have more patience than I do, which is probably one of the many reasons they're attorneys and I'm not. But I don't see how people can't just go in that courtroom and go, this is complete bullshit. Let this guy go. This is insane. I can't believe we're living through this. George Orwell wrote his books as a warning, not as a freaking instruction manual, you freaking lunatics. How has nobody done that yet?
Right. Well, like I said, they worry that somebody is going to do that. That's why press access has been so difficult and why the public can't be a part of this. I know you're speaking somewhat figuratively, but it's actually true. They want to prevent something like that from happening. They want to prevent mass crowds of people standing up and being very much against this prosecution. Interestingly, yesterday, if you look at some of the headlines with regard to the Assange coverage in mainstream publications, they all talk about how Assange had an outburst in court. That is their headline. That was the most significant piece of information they could take away from the second day. I mean, is it an outburst? Not really, no. But he made a statement, of course, and it was grossly taken out of context by mainstream publications, all to make him look bad.
What was the statement?
He said, "This is nonsense. This is nonsense." It was regarding a statement that was made between the prosecutor and another individual, but I can't remember exactly who it was. But yeah, that's all he said. This is nonsense. It happened early in the day, and that seemed to be very significant to mainstream publications.
It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. This is nonsense. That's what he said. I mean, first of all, yeah, again, would you have that amount of restraint? Do you think most people would? I mean, okay, you've been held in solitary confinement for how long? Was it 7 years? Was that the total, or was it longer? 7 years for doing your job, for publishing, mm-hmm. and then you have to sit in this ridiculous court for these charges that are beyond bogus. I mean, with just what we've covered in this interview, you don't have to have a law degree to know that this is absolutely freaking ridiculous. You don't have to, understand the ins and outs of, how intelligence works to understand what they're doing to Chelsea Manning and why they're doing it. They're trying to force a confession out of her because otherwise they got nothing against this guy other than he published some stuff that we don't like. Well, guess what? We supposedly have this thing called freedom of the press. It's a pretty bogus notion, considering when it comes to the Press Freedom Index, the United States is barely in the top 50. And in my opinion, they deserve to be lower. This is one of the many reasons why I feel they deserve to be lower. Uh, I think this is nonsense. Wow. I wish I had the restraint that I would
Yeah.
just say this is nonsense, and I wouldn't have much more illustrated language, shall we put it that way? If I was in that courtroom, would you have that kind of restraint, Taylor?
No, I mean, think about the situation he is in. He's a torture victim as well. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Melzer, visited Assange with 2 other medical experts. This was in May of 2019. Each of them examined him separately and came to the determination that he has been subjected to psychological torture. And Niels Melzer wrote reports to the UK government, Ecuadorian government, Swedish government, and American government. And he did receive a response after some time. Each government responded a little bit differently, but the UK has failed to really act appropriately because they are required to conduct an independent investigation into torture, and they have yet to do that. And so we are unaware really how this is going to impact him mentally, but it was stated in court at one of the call-over hearings over the summer that a recent psychological report stated that just within the past few weeks, his mental health was declining. So, and people who know him personally say that anytime he makes a statement in court, he doesn't sound like himself, and a little bit slower to react, not as sharp and quick. And so this is really taking a toll on him. And this is someone's life in many, many years that he can't get back.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your